Thank you very much, Father Jim. It's like you've given the entire semestral that we've learned from the prejudicial in 2 hours. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank
Actually,
you very much.
we choose the course, Father, the topic, because we read your opinion in a Daily Inquirer in the newspaper,
Yes.
trusting the church wisdom on
Mhm.
void marriages. Na meron tayong pwedeng alternative in case instead of divorce, but we have just to weaponize the family code of the Philippines, Father. Okay, meron po tayong mga questions, Father. Can we have it?
Yeah, one
We
question.
There's
Yes.
64 entries in the chat.
Father, there's one question here. What are your thoughts on the possibility of spouse abuse or violence as automatic grounds for psychological incapacity for annulment if corroborated by due evidence?
Okay.
That's the first.
So let's answer that question by question, no? Because otherwise I'll forget what you just said. Let
Yes.
me answer that first. It's very important, for us to realize that a declaration of nullity looks at the marriage in theory, the coming about of the marriage, and we're showing that it did not come about. So the things that happen afterwards are almost irrelevant to that process, unless they are, meaning to say that what happened afterwards shows the state of mind, the quality of the person, etc., when he said, I do. That's why anything like that happens afterwards cannot be automatic. It must be connected. It must be shown that that situation of spousal abuse, whatever, was present at the time of marriage. When you say, for example, spousal abuse, which can be shown by with evidence, that shows you how the guy is after the marriage. But does that show anything about how he was before the marriage? That must be demonstrated. And that's what should happen in court. And that can be demonstrated if you show that that's a continuing pattern, that when they were dating, he was already violent, that as a as a normal, I mean, as a person, he tended to solve problems in a violent way, talagang brusco, talagang basagulero, or whatever.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you need witnesses to say that.
Yes.
So you must establish the pattern of spousal abuse as a characteristic of that person even before marriage.
Yes, Father. Thanks. There's another question. This is coming from Sebastian Mercaida. What are your thoughts on the possibility of passing an alternative annulment bill to the Congress to strengthen it with the government adopting more grounds for annulment from the Catholic Church since the Church has better grounds in canon law?
Sure. Definitely, I'm all for that. As a matter of fact, it's just good for you to know because it should you should know who your friends are in the same way you should know who your enemies are.
Yeah.
Okay.
That there's a move in Congress, spearheaded by Tingog party list representative
Good.
Jude Asidre. Um, they have a bill. It's co-authored by three, and it's fantastic. It's if it were really up to me, I would give a total reworking of that section of the family code so that the articles are arranged the way I presented it, no? That the three different legs of the juridical structure of marriage, if they could be separated that way so that it's obvious, it's clear, so that even lawyers don't just memorize things, but it's an aid to memorization. When you have a structure in your head, then you can memorize it better because there's a structure. Unlike now, it's just a hodgepodge of norms, reasons for this, and there's no system to it. There must be a system. If it were up to me, I'd do that. But it's also true that the Congress would be more resistant to a total recrafting rather than just introducing small changes here and there, as long as the essential things not included will still be included. And there's a bill like that in the works. So if you hear about it, Jude Asidra and Company, the bill to enlarge the grounds for nullity, that's the thing to support. No, I mean, I recommend that you support. Hmm?
Okay, how about Father po, there's a bill filed by former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo
Mhm.
giving civil effects to nullified degrees from the Catholic Church.
From
Yes.
the Catholic
From the
Church
Catholic Church.
only.
Catholic Church
Yeah.
on.
Okay. You know, that's an old idea. The first bill filed that way was filed by
Sol
Father
Aragones.
Monsignor Baluma in
Yeah.
Okay.
1898, you know, the so-called Baluma Bill, and proposal. And that's good, you know, but you have to be realistic. Because I immediately see difficulties with that. Because how can you grant that to the Catholic Church? I mean, without falling right smack in the forces of separation of church and state. Mind you, when we, you know, these changes that we're proposing or I'm proposing for the family code, it's not on the ground that they are canon law. As a matter of fact, if you can introduce them without mentioning canon law, better. But even if you did mention their point of argument or their rationality, their what do you call this, the force with which they can be or they should be carried is not because they're proposed by the church, but rather they make good juridic sense. It just so happened that the church thought of them first, no? You can say that the Newtonian mechanics is an English law of physics. I hate everything English, and the French won't accept it because it's English. Well, no, his big English has nothing to do with it. It just so happened that Newton was from England. In the same way, I hate Cartesian calculus because I don't like the French. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting calculus because of or Leibniz for that matter. I don't like the Germans, so I don't want differential calculus because it's by a German. No, it's not like that. No, it makes sense. Now, when you do something like that, it's so, I mean, at your face, it's favoring the Catholic Church. The next thing that will happen is why not favor also the Sharia law? Why not favor whatever other religion there? I mean, maybe the self-proclaimed Son of God has his own code for matrimonial law, the Kibuloy law of marriage and family, and why not that? No, that's the next thing, and that will be problematic. Hmm?
Okay, thank you very much, Father. By the way, if anybody who would like to ask question, you may just
Unmute.
raise your hands and I'll call on you. There's another one question. There's another question here, Father. How about people in the autistic spectrum?
Hmm.
Do they have the capacity for marriage?
Well, you know, it's called the spectrum. It's not called the spectrum, rather, for nothing, because a spectrum is a spectrum. No, there are grades depending on how they are. They may be, but the entrada, I would say, they're severely challenged for that
Yes.
because part of that spectrum precisely is the inability to process the environment or what comes in from the environment and vice versa to relate to it. And marriage is conjugal love that is intimately or what's they call that? Imminently, rather, not intimately, imminently relational. And the problem of the autistic spectrum is a problem of relation. How can you relate? You know? But if you can show that they are capable, then they're capable. That's the reason why this is important. The so-called incapacity to assume for reasons of psychological nature cannot be judged by a psychologist. The one who judges that is the tribunal. The input of the psychologist, which is important, is just to describe what that person is who's suffering the psychological anomaly, what are the manifestations, etc., etc. But then to make the connection that such characteristics, such psychological abnormality is connected to the capacity to give and to accept the rights and obligations of marriage, that's up to the judge.
Okay,
So to
Father. Thank you very much.
the judge.
Okay. Thank you, Father. Another question we have here is from
Okay,
Olivia.
I'd like to add one more thing regarding
Okay.
autism. No? Years ago, when I was a chaplain of a private school, we had a couple of children, boys, who were very nice, but they belonged to the spectrum. So they would go to school, they were being mainlined, they had their own caregivers, and the time came for first communion. Hmm. They were 2 or 3 years behind their classmates because precisely they're autistic. But okay, but they were normal enough, so to speak. They pray, they could understand what communion was. Okay, so now the whole batch was being prepared for first communion. So the part of the preparation for first communion is first confession, right? And that became a problem. Why? Because these poor kids, these kids, they're beautiful children, just didn't have any idea of what sin was. They didn't have the consciousness of sin because they're good. They just do what they know is the right thing and they avoid what they so they're like that. So they're not conscious of having done anything contrary to what they think is right and wrong. So therefore I found myself at a loss as a priest how to hear their confession. They couldn't accuse themselves of anything. Thank God, I came across literature that says precisely the degree of maturity necessary to appreciate the difference between normal bread and the Eucharistic host and wine, etc., to understand that here there's some transubstantiation. The degree of maturity needed for that is a lot less than the degree of maturity needed to differentiate moral behavior and immoral behavior. So they were mature enough, they had sufficient intellect to go to communion, but they couldn't go to confession. You see, that's what happens with autism. That's a gray area that's very, very peculiar, very, very personal, very, very individual, and it's up to the judge to or to the priest, to the parish priest, to determine. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Father. There's another question here. Any reason as to why there is no collaboration, integration of canon law into the present laws on nullity of marriage in the Philippines?
Yeah, separate the so-called poorly understood separation of church and state, together with an increasing laicist mentality. There was a time, up to now, it happens most of the time, that when a cop or anyone sees me, if I roll down the window, that I'm a priest driving, then I get all the consideration. It's called, somebody called it the cast of power. No? But of late, I'm noticing that less and less people really mind that. No? I just got into an accident along EDSA 2 weeks ago, a little fender bender, and the owner was at the beginning a little bit belligerent, and even when I said I'm a priest, to him it didn't matter. You know, I think he was it looked like he was a mason or something like that. So that's what's happening here. You know, a laicist mentality that just abhors, without saying so, anything Catholic. Mm. So that's the reason, even if it's already common sense. It's lack of intellectual, in the end, it's lack of intellectual integrity. It's nominalism carried to the max, no? Legal positivism is the bane of our age. Actually, at the end of the day, the reason behind that is, or the logic behind that is, the reason for the exigibility of laws, according to this mentality, is the will of the legislator. And if the legislator doesn't want, he doesn't want, period. But as you know very well, that's not the correct juridic sense of law. The exigibility of a law is because that's the way things are. That's the reason why you can demand them, not the other way around. I can demand them, and so therefore that's the way they will be. Oops. So there's something
What?
wrong in, right? Any clear thinking individual will see that. But there are many people who are not clear thinking. I once had a tussle with the dean of a prestigious university. They even pride themselves as the best law school in the land. Because can you imagine, he had the effrontery to say that the declaration of nullity is just a legal fiction. It's actually divorce. When we know that these people are really divorcing and we're calling it declaration of nullity, calling a declaration of nullity a legal fiction. And I was trying to explain, but it wouldn't get through his head. It was the dean. That what happened here is rather the other way around, that the law, the juridic system, created the fiction in this marriage, this specific marriage. And not really with malice, but it did, in the sense that the form was given, the witnesses were there, they expressed their consent, the requirements documented were met, so a marriage took place. That's a fiction, because now you recognize, there were defects, there were ingredients that weren't there, we didn't know, now we know, and we can demonstrate it. So now what happens in the declaration of nullity is the tribunal repairs the fiction that it had created, what do you call this, carelessly, saying that there's no marriage. So the fiction is the marriage. The declaration of nullity is the rectification of that fiction, so that it agrees now with reality, that in reality, there was no marriage, you see? But not very many people, or some people don't want to think that way. Okay. And
Okay.
as I said, it
Thanks,
was a deep.
Father. Okay, that's also from TP Rosario. I'll just simplify the questions. Those who have prenuptial agreement and not are not really married.
Okay, it's like this. One of the impediments, these are impediments, remember? These are the legally established characteristics or situations that renders a person incapable of getting married. And one of those is this, a provision. A condition of the future invalidates marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's it.
Condition of the future. Now, try to understand what condition
Sure.
is. A condition is
Not
not a provision to do something. A provision to do something, well, that's valid. If you want to bind yourself to do something in the future, then you're perfectly. No, a condition is like a foundation for something that this marriage, this I do, this consent, the constitution of this marriage depends on this condition. But this condition happens to be something that can only be verified in the future. It's like saying, I will marry you provided you pass the bar exams next year.
mm,
Now, that condition, that kind of a prenup, invalidates the marriage. Why? Because the condition on which the consent is built is not yet there. That will only become valid when he has passed the bar exam. Okay? A different matter if I marry you, but we make the condition that you try your darndest best to pass the bar exam next year. Well, that's a different story. That he will try his darndest best to pass the bar exam. But not that he will pass the bar exam, because he doesn't know if he will pass. You cannot put that as a condition. No?
yes.
Now, most of prenups belong to that other class, what I say, that they bind themselves to act a certain way in the future. And what is this? That all the monies that I bring in here before marriage will not enter in our conjugal property. Well, that's perfectly valid if they both agree on that. But what they're gonna do is that what happens within the marriage will still be separate. No, that's not right, because in conjugal life, the two will be one flesh. Make of these lives one life, etc., etc. So such a condition will invalidate the marriage. So that's why I say when people have prenups, be careful what the prenups are. Yes. And the
Yes
priest
po.
should be bright enough to get into that, no? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. We have a question from Brother Robbie Shalsita. Please
Yeah,
Please.
unmute.
Robbie. Robbie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hi, Father. I really wanted to attend this actually. Uh,
I hope
well,
so.
well, I have a colleague who has been separated from her husband for over 10 years. And the reason behind it was because when they got married, the husband actively had a mistress. So she
Okay.
found out during the marriage, and so they just went their separate ways. So obviously there was already that kind of an impediment. It could be grounds for a declaration of nullity, but it seems that she's not been able to work on it because of financial concerns. So 10 years after, she's still married both legally and in the church.
Mhm.
So what advice can I give her? Because and now her husband doesn't even return any messages. She can't call him. She can't reach him.
Okay.
So what
First of
advice
all,
can I get her? Because obviously she supports divorce because it's easier if once
mm,
the bill is passed.
okay. Now, that's a matter of opinion whether it will be easier, no? Now, the first thing that you have to disabuse her is of rather is to think that that fact of having a mistress when they were married is an impediment. It's not. It's not. That's not one of the impediments. No.
Okay.
Now, there could be a ground though, and it's not the impediment. It's the ground again. No, this is where the richness of canon law comes in. The ground of vitiated consent. That when she gave her consent, she didn't know that thing. That there was an ongoing thing. So lack of due discretion. In this particular case, you could even put it in more, shall we say, mundane terms, lack of due diligence, no, on her part. She got married to a womanizer. Or maybe he's not a womanizer. Maybe that's another thing that will have to be proven. It was just that he had a mistress at that time, but which,
Mm-hmm.
or who rather, he might have dismissed because precisely they were getting married or soon after they got married. It depends on what the situation were, you know. But just don't say that it was an impediment because it's not. But I'm not saying there's no
Okay.
ground because the way she describes it, and maybe more of it can come if she talked with the right person. That really there's ground for either lack of due discretion on her part or even lack of due discretion on his part. If you're really like that, then why marry? No,
Mm-hmm.
what were you thinking when you got married? Because marriage is a lifetime commitment, one on one, totally. So were you like that? Or there's another ground here, simulation. It could be simulation because he was saying, I do to what? To the content of marriage. Total self-giving, exclusive, and which is monogamous, and indissoluble. When at the back of his head, he was maintaining a relationship. That's simulation. You see, there are several grounds here, depending on which is easier to prove, given the conditions and the available proof, the available evidence rather, the available evidence, whether it can constitute proof. There's a difference, you know, in law. Um, what ground you will use. But hearing what so far, I'm not closing my mind. There is really a possibility.
Yes, Father. Next
Thank you,
question.
Father.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you, Robbie. Brother
Bobby.
Robbie.
We have another question from Brother Wayne. Yes, po. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ate Ruby, and good afternoon once again, Father Jim. Was a very nice presentation, and one of the key points that I thought I understood coming from your presentation was that maybe we should be doing something that will prevent the recurring theme of the Congress.
Mhm.
Like once in every Congress, there is a move to pass a divorce bill. And
Yes.
I'm not sure how that can be possibly executed. I'm thinking that we should be like campaigning for legislators who are really against this kind of an action. But of course, that's a kind of very difficult. So I'm thinking, can we actually question the the deliberation of this bill with the Supreme Court? But I'm thinking that maybe the Supreme Court will say this is premature action. There is nothing to act on it yet because the law is not yet
Fiction.
passed. But
Yeah.
in what possible way can we actually execute this, Father Jim? How can we? Is it every start of the Congress we go to the Senate and to the House and do the lobbying at the first day, or maybe you have something in mind, Father, na we can be we can do so that we can be more effective in the process.
Okay, definitely. First of all, you're right in saying that the Supreme Court will not act on this because there's nothing yet. No,
Yes.
there's the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution of prior restraint. You don't restrain something before it's even done. No? So the move that I really support is what I stated earlier. In Spanish, there's a saying, muerto el perro, se acabó la rabia. No? That with the dog dead, that's the end of the danger of rabies. No? So remove the reason for um, the divorce bill. And what is the reason? The legitimate reason, because there's an illegitimate one. The illegitimate one is that those people really want a divorce because they want to renege on their commitments. There's nothing we can do about that motive. It's there, but it should be denied. But there are so many others who really have a valid, in law you call it a pretension, an aim, no, a finality, a goal that they're trying to accomplish, which is to address the reality of irreparably broken or very dysfunctional marriages. And what you can do with that is what I said, to establish more grounds so that you can process those things properly. So therefore, the amendments to the family code, in order to increase the grounds and to facilitate the declaration of nullity, because majority of the cases of dysfunctional or irreparably broken unions are really cases of null or invalid marriages, and they should be declared so. Hmm?
I see, Father. So that means that the better way really is to support the
Procedurally,
move, the latest move of Congressman Jude of the Tingog party list and his team
that's
and
it.
other co-sponsors to really seriously get support alliance on this move to amend the family code. Thank you.
I strongly advocate and support that. Hmm?
Yeah. Thank you, Kuya Wayne. Thank you, Father. Father, there's another question here. Uh, if a husband lied to her to his wife regarding his educational qualification, like he's supposed to be just an elementary graduate, well, he told his wife that he was a second year college undergraduate.
Mhm.
However, during the time of their marriage, the wife saw that the husband was really very uneducated, and also he also curses his wife every now and then. So what do you
Mhm.
think about that? Is it
Ground.
nullifiable? Is it a ground for nullification?
Okay. remember the ground is to withhold or to misrepresent yourself regarding a quality which of itself makes conjugal life difficult, no? Very difficult. Now, of itself, lack of education in terms of academic education does not make a conjugal life very difficult of itself. But in that particular case, it's not just of itself, you know. There are other attendant things there. It's really not only uneducated academically, he's even boorish. No? If he's cursing and things like that, is you know, he's a, you know, there's no other term for it. He's a jerk, right? So now, what will be the ground to prove
Pro-
that that information was withheld for the purpose of getting marital consent?
Mhm.
It's not easy to prove that because you have to get into the mind of the other party. What was in his mind? What was he thinking? Was he really withholding this information? Was he fooling the other party? You can do that. But it's much easier to prove lack of due discretion on his part, on her part rather, no? Akala ko, no, the minute you can say, what were you thinking? Ba't mo pinakasalan yan, no? Well, hindi ko alam ganyan ano. That's lack of due discretion. Lack of due discretion is such a wide thing, no? So many marriages are dysfunctional because of this. Hindi ka nag-isip nung pinakasalan mo yan, no? Kulang yung pag-iisip mo. Hindi mo inisip na mabuti. Yun.
Father, was there any prescribed period with regards to filing of nullity with that
Kind of.
kind of reason or
That's the right
ground?
thing. That's the nice thing about this, no? Of making it part of the family code, because part of the difference between void and voidable marriages is the prescription. Hmm? So
Mhm.
by identifying the two, that if these characteristics are there, they're void from the from the very beginning. And if they're void from the very beginning, there should be no prescription.
Mhm.
Because if they were void
Mhm.
at the beginning, they're
Yes,
still void
yes.
up to now. We just have to declare it. No? So because
Father,
that
there's another. Oh yeah, go ahead, po.
so
Sorry.
the distinction of void and voidable is like I don't know what, no? I mean, nagustuhan lang yan. These are the voidable and these are the void. There's no logical, juridically defensible reason why one is voidable or the reasons for voidable and void ab initio. They're the same.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, po. Okay. We have another question from Brother Demi. Kuya Demi, go ahead, please.
Father, can we consider that a
Yes, yeah.
parang ab initio, deceit
I'm sorry.
case? Deceit, Father, that's deceit because he mentioned that he graduate his second year college.
Yeah, but you cannot prove because an important element in deceit is the intention to deceive for reasons of getting a consent. It's hard to prove that. No? Was that his intention? O bukang
Yes.
bibig lang, o nagyayabang lang, no? That I'm a college graduate. But if he did it for the purpose of getting a consent para mapasagot niya, how do you prove that? It's a difficult thing.
Okay. Father, there's another question here. Kaya lang baka may matamaan tayo. Father, she doesn't want to be mentioned. Father, isn't the priest given the responsibility to detect if the couple are capable, is capable of entering the sacrament of marriage?
Of course.
So, because he said that pre-Cana cannot possibly detect that.
Well, it's like this. The pre-Cana seminary in itself may not be able to detect it,
Yes.
but the canonical investigation should, to a
Should.
large extent, to a large extent, because the the canonical investigation by the parish priest, the interview, in other words, should get to the hard questions. Now, if the pre-cana is done properly, it should contain in itself elements that should make the parties ask themselves these hard questions. So
Mhm.
that's the reason why the pre-cana cannot be half a day, cannot even be a day. In AIM family, the outfit I'm involved in,
Sweet.
we have 2 days of pre-cana, and even that is too short. It should be longer. You know what you know, the syllabus presented by the Vatican has enough for 20 months. Because they took it from the proposal of the Spanish Episcopal Conference that had enough for 2 years. Because according to the Spanish bishops, if it takes 4 years to prepare yourself to become an architect, an engineer, or a lawyer, it should take as much time to prepare yourself to get married, which is the most important thing you can do in your life, rather than construct build. So in
Yes,
AIM
Father.
family, what we're doing is, since nobody is willing to do that for a pre-Cana, what we have is a 2-day pre-Cana, morning and afternoon with Zoom, and then enough materials for monthly meetings, even though it's recorded and you can do it asynchronously, but you can also do it as a group for the next 5 years to accompany a couple with all the issues that were included in that original syllabus of 20 months, but to be covered for the next 5 years. Because at least if they cannot be exposed to that before they got married, okay, at least you make sure that they're helped accompanied in the next 5 years. Because statistics show that majority of the breakups or marital breakdowns happen in the first 5 to 10 years of marriage. Anybody who weathers the 10 years will weather for the next of their married life. So somebody who celebrates the 10th anniversary statistically will celebrate the 50th if they're alive.
Yes, Father. Father, we'll be limited to just two more questions.
Okay.
One is a follow-up question from Mr.
Robbie.
Robbie Shelsita. Father, what can we say to those who would like to apply for nullification and annulment in the civil court about their complaint about the cost?
Too expensive.
It's too expensive. What can we possibly tell them?
Too expensive where? In the civil court?
Yeah, in the church and the civil court, both.
In the first place, you have to tell them that it's not true that the process in church is expensive.
Yes,
It's
correct.
only the provinces at 60. The civil court is expensive. It's at least 300,000, at least. No?
Yeah.
So the only thing is those two are not on, they're separate. What is declared null in one is not automatically declared null in the other, unfortunately. No? But it's not true that it is expensive in church because Francis has even decreed that in case of real need, meaning to say they really can't afford, that the process of declaration of nullity in church should be free. And it's like that. They're free.
That's correct po. Yes, Father.
For the
I
information po, sa Diocese of Navariches po, we
only charge
only charge
30,000.
30,000 donation.
And there are also cases that we give it for free. Actually,
Yes.
we've handled 3 cases for free already.
Okay.
And
very
in
good.
the Diocese
Of
of
Caloocan.
Caloocan, it's 100% free.
Yeah, because Bishop Ambo has that mindset. No, you know what he said once to a gathering of canon lawyers, because precisely that point came up of, we have to cover the costs and etc. You know what he said? It's amazing. I said, wow, I like this guy. That was the first time I said to myself, I like this guy. No? Because he said,
Mhm.
problemahin yun. Dami-dami nyo ng problema. Problema ng obispo yun. No? Basta gawin niyo yung trabaho nyo, yung bahala dyan. Because okay yan. So, which is correct. That's the correct attitude,
Yes
no?
po.
By the way, since you're all involved in church things, I've always said money can never be the problem for doing the work of God. There's money out there
Yes.
and people are willing to help. The only thing is you have to have a good project. You have to do it properly. You know, in my 40 years of priesthood, I have been 50 years in Opus Dei. Never have I been held back by something good I wanted to do for lack of funds. And not because I get it from Opus Dei, no, because I can't get anything from Opus Dei for that matter. All the projects I have done for families, for marriage, is because people give money. But that's it. You have to do it well.
That's correct, Father. Yes, Father. I have here the last question. What do you think and how do you think we can improve the pre-Cana in order for the pre-Cana givers or the speakers to detect that these couples are not really meant for each other?
You know, that's very tricky. There's a quick answer, but there's a more truthful answer that you really have to study. You cannot fabricate anything, no? I mean, even as a young professor, I used to teach chemistry. I had always told my students, you know, this business of sharing, I don't believe in it, no, because me, I don't mince words, right? You should have seen that by now. I used to say, not even 100 ignorami or ignoramuses can generate an iota of important truth by sharing things. You learn by getting a professor teaching you what he learned by having a professor himself. You know? So we have to study. So study what marriage is, study what the cases are, study pastoral work, and then that's the first thing, study. And then the second thing is you really have to dedicate time to listening. You have to know the couple. And there is the big problem because how can you know the couple that much if you're going to see them only one weekend, you know? So the accompaniment for the real pre-K should take longer than just one weekend. It's too short to. That's why, and here is an important thing that I'm about to say, that marriage is supposed to take place in your own parish because you know, nowadays people don't even know what their parish is, right? They're so campante about where they are. We're moving, we're living in a mobile world. You go to mass where it's more comfortable, where it's air conditioned, or where the mall is closest to you afterwards because you go to mass along the way. No, people should know what their parish is. We have to be parish oriented because only the parish priest will know his flock. But that's another question. Does the parish priest really know his flock? Well, he should, because otherwise he's not doing his job. So a parish priest might know his flock. So the people who will get married, because they're his parishioners, he knows them. He should know them inside out, and he can advise them properly. Otherwise, then all kinds of, in Spanish we call it le metieron goles, no? They will sink goals in him. Maraming makakalusot, and that's what happens, no?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Father. I'm supposed to end with that question. However, I cannot deny this person. He's also one of your students or spiritual director daw po kayo. I'd like to call on Lucille Abraham for a brief question. Miss Lucille.
Oh,
Go ahead, Lucille.
Yes,
oh Lucille. Yeah, first.
Father, yeah, this is a question which I would like to ask in behalf of Dr. Paul Santos Estrella. And his question is, hi, Father, I am sure this has been asked before, but I want to hear your reasonable opinion. What will the couple do if differences are irreconcilable? Should they continue to live together? That's the question po of Dr. Paul Santos Estrella po.
Okay. The answer to that is very clear. They committed themselves to make it work. So unless there was something irreconcilable from the very beginning, in which case they shouldn't have gotten married, then they should reconcile. That's what marriage is. Nobody is perfect. And perhaps these are good final words here. Your takeaway from this, no? You and I were all sinners.
Action.
And yet God brought us into existence when we were conceived with a unconditional love. What God has loved into existence, He will not unlove. There's nothing we can do that can change God's love for us. And that's the reason for our hope. That's the reason for our struggle. And by the way, that's also the reason for our sense of responsibility, in the sense that if God loves me that much, kakaya naman if I don't love him back, no? So it's not anymore a question of servile love or servile obedience, but out of loyalty that God deserves it. The same thing happens in marriage. If you really know the person, then you love that person. Love is a free process. You don't love, when they say something, they fell in love. As if, ano yan, nahulog ka sa imburnal? No, 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 no. You love. After you have thought and processed that this is the right thing to do, this is the right person to do it with, so therefore I commit myself, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, richer or poorer, till death. Now what happens? If one works at that, then I don't understand this business of irreconcilable differences. Because before something can become irreconcilable, it was a small thing first. We're supposed to work at it and make it, reconcile it. If you allow it to fester until it becomes irreconcilable, that's your doing. And nobody should give you the carte blanche to get out of it and perhaps even perpetrate again. No, you're a perp for prolonging that. You see what this is all about? It's all a defense of freedom and human dignity. That since we are free, then that's why we're intelligent first, because freely we can choose. But once we choose, we exhaust. There are some choices that you exhaust the options. And there again, is one of the bane of our civilization, that people don't want to commit themselves. They don't want to commit themselves because they say they will tie their hands and they won't be free anymore. To which one will have to answer, but don't you see that that's the essence of freedom? Freedom is the capacity to determine oneself. Freedom is the capacity to direct oneself in a choice. Not to make a choice is not an act of freedom. Precisely, it's a non-act. Until I commit myself, I haven't exercised my freedom. But once I commit myself, then freely I will stick to it. Nobody can force me otherwise. So I don't believe in irreconcilable differences that developed. I know that there can be irreconcilable differences before, in which case they should not have gotten married because there are those irreconcilable differences. So if they did, it must be because of lack of due discretion. They were not thinking properly, etc., etc. Okay, if you can prove that in court, then declare it invalid. Okay? So
Okay.
irreconcilable differences, they don't arise after. If they arise after, then it should be reconcilable because they're free. Freedom. But if it existed before, then there's no way you can reconcile that because they existed before. No, that's the reason why it's falling apart. Okay?
Thank